Eire has long been a great asset to the faithful nations. Its Fianna, paid as tithe to New Antioch in lieu of ducats, are a renowned fighting force across the faithful nations. Though this was not always the case, the story of the refounding of the ancient Fianna, the acclaimed warriors of Eire, begins with the demon lord Focalor and the 1804 invasion of the Emerald Isles. Sending his servant Zucchur, a heretic sea lord, and his naval raiders, a plan was put in motion to capture Eire, establishing a forward base of operations on the Emerald Isle to allow a full-scale invasion of Alba and England. Zucchur was the perfect choice to enact this plan. Not only was his patron, the great Duke Focalor, master of the wind and waves, but Zucchur himself possessed a brilliant tactical mind. As both a general and gifted user of goetic magic, the heretic Sea Lord would be the most dangerous threat that the Irish had ever faced. Looking to overwhelm the Irish in a display of force and cunning worthy of his master, Zucchur made a pact with the Cult of the Moon. The Cult of the Moon are followers of the path of the beast, and hiding out in the wild places of the Irish countryside, they began to stir. Their role in this great invasion was one of disruption, and to act as a vanguard force long before the heretics' behemoth-class ships arrived on Irish shores. For many years before the black ships arrived, the Cult of the Moon harassed and harried the Irish forces. Across Eire, young men and women vanished without a trace, victims of straying too far into the woodlands when the moon was full and the power of the beast's followers waxed in strength. These unfortunate victims would return home, profane rituals having carved runes extolling the beast's teachings onto their naked bodies. Their screams heralded their return long before they arrived at the outskirts of their homesteads. Some that returned ultimately fled back into the wilds to rejoin the hidden covens of the beast with whom they now felt kinship. Many in Eire answered the siren call of the path in these dark days, running into the wilds to indulge in the path of the beast, the teachings of the beast offering them freedom from the shackles of civility and the burdens of the Great War. Supplicants of the beast, the warped, lowly mongrel followers of the path raided remote towns and villages, crops were put to flame, and terror gripped the Emerald Isles. Eire found itself increasingly cut off and isolated from the other faithful nations. Ever-rising numbers of its merchant ships and supply lines were plundered out at sea. As Zucchur watched the unfolding chaos grip the Irish faithful, he waited for the opportune moment to bring the true might of his plans to bear. Once he felt the Irish were sufficiently weakened, he put the next phase of his invasion into action. Gathering his fleet, he amassed a mighty armada to his side, and in a surprise assault he made landfall in Eire. The very ground shook as the expeditionary forces of Zucchur brought mighty heretic artillery to the shore unhindered. The Irish gathered their strength to repel the invaders, but this was countered by the tactical mastery of Zucchur. Using mass blood sacrifices, the Sea Lord performed a great ritual. The goetic power unleashed was enough to tear open reality and reawaken the long-dormant Hellgate at Lake Polynephrine. The armies of the Court of the Seven-Headed Serpent spewed from the gate like a furious tide of death. With this influx of hellish allies for their foes, the path of the beast preying on their townships, and the heretic armies of Zucchur, the defenders of Eire were like lambs to the slaughter. The great vice of the two hellish armies tightened on the Irish forces and crushed them in a two-pronged assault, masterminded by Zucchur. The army of Eire was routed, and High King Murdoch was killed in battle. As the High King's head toppled from his shoulders, Zucchur ripped the crown of Ireland from its scalp, long before King Murdoch's body was cold. To all looking upon the conflict, the heretic Sea Lord had claimed the crown of Eire by right of conquest. With its field armies gone, the coastal cities of Eire quickly fell, and before long the cathedrals, monasteries, churches, abbeys and shrines were razed to the ground or converted to profane worship. In the holy places where altars to the Lord once stood, sacrificial altars were erected, and the black knives of heretic priests ended the lives of any who dared raise against Eire's new masters. In the places where the hymns and holy word once rang out in song in their halls, now only the profane gospel and hell's coercive teachings echoed. Defiantly, the still-living faithful crowned King Niall as their new leader, and he moved the capital to the ancient seat of power where the kings of old held court, the town of Kilkenny. Since the new capital was inland, it was far easier to defend from the heretic navy and the might of its guns. Vast swaths of the Irish countryside fell to heretic rule, the coastal cities were gone or conquered, and the situation for those who remained was dire. A mass exodus of refugees from the war attempted to flee across the sea to Alba, England and France. With England still reeling from the Battle of the Bloody Cliffs, their fleet in ruins, they were unable to offer aid to their neighbours. The Crown was keenly aware that if Eire were to fall, a full-scale invasion of England was inevitable. France was the only faithful nation able to offer aid and send reinforcements, with others sending little more than prayers. Though the Duke of New Antioch, seeing the plight of the Irish and the lack of aid offered by the faithful nations, sent word to King Niall. This was not the sorrowful prayers of his contemporaries, but the decree that his personal guard would join the fight and lend their swords to Eire. His message was clear: the Irish needed these elite soldiers even more than the home of all our hopes, and New Antioch stands in solidarity with Eire. Despite this aid being sent to them, it was not enough to stop the refugees being intercepted by the heretic fleet. Some ships were sunk, but most were captured. The crews and passengers of these vessels were sacrificed on red-hot infernal pillars of brass, or shackled to slavery in service to Hell's Court. Many who remained in Eire saw this bleak and seemingly doomed fate and gave up their thoughts of freedom and even their humanity. These despondent and morose men and women joined the many who had walked into the wild places and taken up the teachings of the beast. Resigning themselves to a fate they thought inevitable, these betrayers now preyed on those they had once called brother. As a bombardment by an artillery witch coven killed her father on the front lines, Queen Brigid took the throne in 1890. Her first act as queen was to repeal an ancient ban on the Fianna. This ancient sect of warriors had been banned by the church due to their paganistic beliefs and a culture that the church could not reconcile with. The repealing of this act not only stirred some misgivings in the faithful nations, but even in the court of Queen Brigid herself. Her own confessor voiced his irritation and concerns at the ancient ban's revocation. The Fianna and their berserkers were famous hunter warriors of old, and with the situation in Eire so dire, the Irish would need all the help they could get. Another, at first unpopular decision of the new queen was to ignore the counsel of her advisors on whom she should marry. Despite his low-born origin, the queen married Donal, who had proven himself a keen strategic mind in general of some renown. To many outsiders looking upon the Emerald Isles during this time though, the Queen's ignoring her advisors, the country in a state of chaos and ruin, and this marriage to a seeming nobody must have been a grave omen indeed. In fact, on many maps published at the time, Eire was depicted as a lost land, signalling it as already taken by the heretics and another casualty of the Great War, forever lost to the faithful nations. However, Queen Brigid and Donal had a daring and desperate plan. With the Fianna once again hunting the wilds and resuming their ancient ways, the royal court, with its new troops secured, called to the clans of Eire. The royal summons asked every clan to send its remaining strength to one last stand against the heretics. Curiously, the Queen then dispatched a letter to the Pope, a simple request asking for the Bishop of Rome to send a single soldier as a show of support to the Irish. The Supreme Pontiff granted this outwardly superficial gesture, and Queen Brigid revealed her true intention. In a show of audacity that surely shocked the princes of the church, the Queen requested that the soldier be none other than the Paladin on Sheish. What must have baffled everyone even further was that the Supreme Pontiff for some reason agreed, and on Sheish was dispatched to help the Irish. Alone, on Sheish was sent on a sacred quest in utmost secrecy. Storming the Hellgate alone, carrying the banner of Storagran with him, the Paladin strode into Lake Polynephrine and took the fight into Hell itself. As this was occurring, faithful intelligence gathering reported that Zucchur the Conqueror was aboard the Hymn of Obscenity, his flagship. No one is quite sure how the Fianna were able to do what happened next, but somehow, fooling Zucchur's beast guards and acquiring heretic passwords, they launched a surprise attack on the flagship. Against all odds, the Fianna were victorious, destroying the heretic Sea Lord, his flagship, and a number of other vessels in the resultant explosion. What little is known of the details of this mission tell of the heroic actions of a lone Fianna berserker. Against all odds, faced with a hail of heretic gunfire, he charged down the corridors of the behemoth vessel. This hero of Eire carried with him a barrel of explosives. Weathering the storm of bullets, he carried the barrel right into the heart of the Hymn of Obscenity's ammunition stores. The resultant explosion ripped a hole in the enemy fleet as he lit the fuse. While this was a severe blow to the heretic war effort, the loss of Zucchur and the ships that perished alongside him could not change the course of the war alone. Luckily for the faithful, from the shores of Lake Polynephrine to the south came word that Ansheish had succeeded in his mission. Though he was bloodied, his armour torn and battered, and he had lost an eye to the conflict, Ansheish strode from Inferno triumphant, and the Hellgate collapsed behind him. Leaderless and cut off from their demonic reinforcements, the heretic forces were left reeling, and the faithful counterattack began in earnest. Donal led the remaining Irish forces on a fierce campaign of counterattacks and bloody battles. The heretics were pushed back by the fury of the Emerald Isle, the brilliance of General Donal sweeping them into the sea. Losses on both sides were catastrophic. More than 3/4 of the Irish army were killed before the heretics were finally defeated. Even the veterans of the Duke's bodyguard were slain, not a single soul among them returning to New Antioch in the aftermath. This series of brutal, hard-won victories were in part thanks to the Herculean efforts of the Fianna holding back the path of the beast in the wilds. The final death toll for the invasion and the true cost of victory saw half of Eire's population lost to fighting, famine and fleeing the island. To this day, the Irish send their elite skirmishers to New Antioch as tithe in memory of the sacrifice to the Duke's bodyguard, and thanks to New Antioch for its aid in these most dire times. Since the liberation of Eire, the tale of the invasion lives on as a dire warning to every faithful nation, a reminder of how close they all are to true damnation and ruin. Are you as excited as I am to learn more of the Paladin Ansheish and discover more lore for the hard-fought battles of the faithful? Let me know in the comments below. For more lore on the Paladins, click the video link to your left, or to discover the demonic patrons of Hell's forces, click the link to your right. For discounts on your hobby supplies, check out my affiliate links below, and please like, subscribe, share a favourite video with a friend, or become a channel member. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.